My husband accompanied me to the hospital for a routine checkup, and that's when they found the kidney cyst. My husband's first love, who claimed to be some renowned gynecological expert, told me my risk of developing kidney cancer was high. She said the only way to save my life was to remove the kidney immediately. After the surgery, I discovered she had grossly exaggerated my condition. It turned out that her brother had kidney failure, and my kidney was a perfect match. She had used my surgery to save him. When I confronted her, furious, all I got was a divorce agreement from my husband. "If I had known you couldn't have children, I never would have married you," he shouted, his voice dripping with contempt. "Besides, you signed the donation papers yourself. You think calling the police will help? Just get lost. Stop being an eyesore." Their smug faces twisted in my mind as rage and despair surged through me, and right at that moment, I coughed up blood and everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day my husband took me to the hospital for surgery. "Honey, hurry up. I'm starting the car, I'll wait for you downstairs." Michael, my husband, called out as he laced up his shoes, ready to leave. "Vanessa made time just to check you today. Don't keep her waiting," he added from the hallway, already halfway out the door. Standing in the bathroom, I stared at my reflection, taking deep breaths to steady myself. I never expected to be reborn on the very day of that hospital visit. This was the turning point, the day I learned the truth about the man I loved, the man I had shared my life with for so long. The same day I was betrayed by him and Vanessa, the woman who stole more than just my health. The truth was, it was just a harmless kidney cyst. No pain, nothing serious. But Michael insisted on taking me back to the hospital for more tests, swearing that Vanessa, the expert, would give me a thorough checkup. I thought it was his way of caring for me. I was even touched by it. Now, looking back, I see how foolish I had been. In my previous life, the moment we arrived at the hospital, Vanessa had jumped in, taking control of my examination. Later, with a grave expression, she told me, "Sarah, you need to prepare yourself. Your situation doesn't look good. There's a high risk this cyst could turn cancerous." I was petrified, hanging on to her every word, while Michael pretended to be just as worried. "How do we fix it?" he asked, his tone insincere but convincing. "You'll need to have your kidney removed," Vanessa said matter-of-factly. "As long as we take out the left kidney, she should be fine." In my panic, I was lost and unsure what to do. Under Vanessa's intimidation and my husband's fake anxious persuasion, I signed every document they put in front of me. I thought I was just signing standard pre-surgery paperwork, but hidden within it was a kidney donation agreement. It wasn't until after the surgery, when Michael coldly threw the divorce agreement in my face, that the pieces finally clicked together. But by then, it was already too late. Recalling the tragic events of my previous life, I gritted my teeth and murmured, "This time, if I don't drag you both to hell, it would be a waste of the second chance life has given me." Once at the hospital, Michael led me straight to Vanessa. After running a few tests, she looked at the results with a serious expression. "Sarah," Vanessa said, her voice grave, "you need to prepare yourself. Surgery is necessary, and soon. If you delay, the risk of cancer is very high." I pretended to be frightened, but in reality, I had already started secretly recording the conversation on my phone. As evidence, Michael hurriedly put on his concerned act, his brow furrowing. "But it's just a kidney cyst. How could it become cancerous? Could this be a mistake?" Vanessa sighed dramatically. "The chances are low, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. If you don't believe me, you're welcome to get a second opinion at another hospital." Before I could respond, Michael jumped in. "Of course we trust you. It's just hard to accept right now. Isn't there any way we can treat this with medication instead?" Vanessa shook her head and firmly said, "In your wife's case, surgery is the safest and fastest way to address the issue. Medication likely won't be effective." Watching them act out their little play, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. They were really going to great lengths to steal my kidney. Fortunately, before coming to the hospital, I had called my uncle. My parents died when I was young, and it was Uncle Robert who raised me. He had many connections, and the director of this hospital happened to be one of his sworn brothers. In my previous life, I had been so fooled by Michael and Vanessa that I forgot to inform my uncle, and by the time I realized what had happened, it was too late to stop them. But not this time. Uncle Robert was already on his way. I just needed to buy some time, and soon, Michael and Vanessa's lies would unravel. I grabbed the test results and said, "I think I'll go to another hospital for a second opinion." Hearing this, Vanessa's face tightened as she exchanged a quick glance with Michael. He then quickly turned to me, his voice edging toward impatience. "Honey, don't waste time. No matter which hospital you go to, the results will be the same. Vanessa is an expert. If she handles the surgery herself, there's nothing to worry about." I shook my head and replied, I just need to double check before making any decisions. It's not that I don't trust Dr. Larson, I just need some time to wrap my head around all of this. Just then, Vanessa's voice turned more authoritative. Your condition is serious. The longer you delay, the higher the risk. In fact, I'm only making time for this because of Michael. Michael immediately jumped in, eager to push me toward the operating table. Vanessa is really busy, honey. If we start early, we'll have peace of mind sooner. But if you delay, and it really does turn cancerous, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Before I could get a word in, Michael urged Vanessa to get ready for the surgery. Vanessa called over several of her intern assistants, who grabbed me and started dragging me toward the operating room. I struggled with all my might, screaming for help, which caught the attention of people nearby. Uncle Robert hadn't arrived yet, and if they managed to get me into the operating room and perform the kidney removal, everything would be over. Sensing the crowd's eyes on us, Michael rushed over, clamping his hand over my mouth. He put on his best performance, voice dripping with false concern. Honey, even if you don't care about yourself, think about me, think about us. You can't keep delaying this. Dr. Larson is doing everything she can to save you. What are you afraid of? If anything happens to you on that table, I'll suffer with you. With his flawless act, Michael looked like the perfect, devoted husband, doing all he could for his wife. The onlookers, clueless about what was really going on, began chiming in. Dr. Larson is very skilled. She was the one who performed surgery on my mom, and my mom recovered really well. You can't mess around when it comes to your health. If you need treatment, get it done early. Exactly. My dad stubbornly refused to receive treatment for his minor illnesses until it got worse. Because of his stubbornness, he passed away last year. If he only agreed to treatment, he might have lived a few more years. So please, don't make the same mistake. Everyone praised Vanessa, and they all thought Michael was right to push me to undergo surgery. They had no idea what was really happening. To them, I was just a stubborn woman refusing medical help. But who could guess that Vanessa, this highly praised doctor, only wanted my kidney for her brother? Or that after the surgery, the loving husband they saw would throw divorce papers in my face. After I was pushed into the operating room, Vanessa handed me a stack of documents to sign. I'd fallen for this trap in my previous life, but not this time. I refused, glaring at her. Vanessa's frown deepened as she saw my resistance. Michael, impatient, stepped forward and grabbed a pen. I'll sign for her. I know her handwriting. I can forge her signature without any issues. One of the interns nervously spoke up, Sir, that's not allowed. However, Vanessa shot the intern a deadly look. Lillian, do you need a refresher on the rules? You're my student, you should know by now that I decide what happens. Her husband has given consent. Ahead, report me to the director. Let's see who gets kicked out, you or me. If you think this isn't right, go. Her threat shut the intern up immediately, and the others followed suit, too scared to stand up to her. Their futures were in Vanessa's hands after all. Seizing the moment when the interns were distracted, I broke free and tried to run out of the operating room. But Michael was faster. He grabbed me, his grip tight and unyielding, his once friendly face now dark with frustration as he yelled at me, Sarah, stop making a scene. You're wasting time. We're only doing this for your own good. Vanessa, her voice icy, added, if it weren't for Michael, I wouldn't have taken the time to personally perform this surgery for you. Please, stop resisting, you're only hurting yourself. Even at this point, they were still putting on a show, acting as if they were doing me a favor. The sight of them, so self-righteous and smug, made my blood boil. With a burst of fury, I swung my hand and slapped Vanessa hard across the face. The smack echoed in the room, leaving her stunned, her hand flying to her cheek. Sarah, have you lost your mind? Michael shouted, his voice full of rage. Vanessa, her face pale with fury, gritted her teeth and shouted, enough of this. Sedate her. Let's get this surgery over with. My kidney cost 2 lives. Retorting, I yelled, what you're doing is illegal. I'll report you. None of you will get away with this. This whole surgery had been planned in secret by Michael and Vanessa, and they'd broken so many rules. If word got out, they would definitely face serious consequences. In my previous life, I had been fooled by them, stupidly signing the documents without any evidence of how they had manipulated me. I was powerless back then, and I ended up in a miserable situation. But now, I had won. I'd been recording the entire time, and I had already contacted Uncle Robert. I just needed to hold out until he arrived. This time, Michael and Vanessa wouldn't walk away unscathed. Their downfall was coming. Seeing me still struggling with all my might, Vanessa angrily shouted at the intern assistants, what are you all standing around for? Hold her still. The interns rushed to help, pinning me to the operating table as Michael hovered over me. Vanessa, her face twisted with frustration, grabbed the anesthesia needle and started walking toward me. I glared at her, fury bubbling up inside me, and cursed at her. "You're a shameless, vile woman, Vanessa. You seduced a married man and plotted with Michael to destroy me. You'll both get what's coming to you." The rage on their faces was unmistakable, but the interns just looked shocked and confused. Michael quickly tried to cover, snapping at them, "She's hysterical, just ignore her." Vanessa's face hardened as she closed in with the needle. I felt despair tightening around me. Was I really about to suffer the same fate as before? Just when I thought all hope was lost, the doors to the operating room burst open. A group of people stormed in, leaving Vanessa and Michael frozen in place. Tears flooded my eyes when I saw my Uncle Robert at the front, his reinforcements pushing past the interns and grabbing Michael. Michael struggled, his voice panicked. "Who the hell are you? What do you think you're doing?" Before he could say another word, Uncle Robert slapped him hard across the face. Without giving him a second glance, he turned to me, his voice filled with frustration. "I warned you, didn't I? I told you not to marry this pretty-faced playboy, but no, you thought I was just being harsh. You didn't even let me come to your wedding, and didn't dare tell him about your protective uncle. Now look where it's gotten you." I threw myself into his arms, sobbing, the weight of everything finally crashing down on me. At this moment, Vanessa snapped out of her shock and barked, "This is a hospital. You can't just come in here causing chaos. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." But Uncle Robert only snorted coldly, "Go ahead and call them. We're gonna do it after all. My niece refused this surgery, yet you tried to force her onto the table. Is this what you call a hospital? 'Cause it looks like a slaughterhouse to me." A flash of panic crossed Vanessa's face, but she quickly masked it with anger. Just then, a heavy-set, bald man entered the room, smiling as he addressed my uncle. "Mr. Yates, please calm down. The director is out of town, but he asked me to handle this personally." Uncle Robert eyed him coolly and said calmly, "Deputy Director Gray, this hospital owes us an explanation for what happened to my niece." Deputy Director Richard Gray cleared his throat and replied, "Dr. Larson is not only highly skilled, but also has an impeccable reputation for her medical ethics. I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? Could such a matter be lightly brushed aside with just the word misunderstanding? Unable to contain my anger any longer, I pulled out my phone and played the recording of the conversation between Vanessa and Michael from earlier. Vanessa's expression turned tense, her face looking extremely grim. Michael, in a panic, struggled to grab my phone, but the strong men my uncle brought held him down tightly, leaving him unable to move. As the recording played, the deputy director frowned but didn't lose his composure. "Mrs. Carson, while this recording is concerning, it isn't enough to prove any malicious intent. Dr. Larson's actions, while unorthodox, were motivated by urgency to save your life. But rest assured, I will punish her according to the hospital's rules. As for the issue of the forged signature, that was done by your husband, and it has little to do with Dr. Larson. Lastly, I should remind you that recording in the hospital without a doctor's consent is against the rules. Mrs. Carson, what you did is illegal, and this recording cannot serve as valid evidence." Hearing this, I was livid. Just as I was about to argue, my uncle gently placed a hand on my shoulder. He narrowed his eyes at the deputy director. "Deputy Director, are you trying to cover for Dr. Larson?" The deputy director, still smiling insincerely, replied, "Mr. Yates, I'm just following the hospital's rules. I'm not trying to show any favoritism. The director may be a friend of yours, but this matter will be handled by the book." The deputy director's tone became firmer, and he adopted an air of defiance, making many of the onlookers outside the operating room take his side. I clenched my fists, ready to reveal the full extent of Vanessa and Michael's plot, how they planned to steal my kidney to save her brother's life, when suddenly, the police arrived. Uncle Robert leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "Let me handle this. Stay calm. The best part is yet to come." I was momentarily stunned, unsure of what he meant. But he simply gave me a mysterious smile and said no. The police arrived and took us all down to the station. Just as the deputy director had said, the recording I had made secretly on my phone couldn't be used as evidence. After we gave our statements, the police just let Vanessa and Michael off with nothing more than a verbal warning. It was frustrating, but there wasn't much more we could do. Vanessa even shot me a cold, dark look before turning and heading back to the hospital without a word. Meanwhile, Michael lingered for a moment, looking like he wanted to say something, but Uncle Robert didn't give him the chance. He stepped forward and said coldly, "Today's a great day. Why don't you and my niece go settle your divorce? Of course, you can refuse to divorce, but I can't guarantee you won't have an accident, like a car crash or something." "Me?" Michael puffed up, trying to look tough, and shouted, "Are you threatening me? You think a few words can scare Uncle Robert didn't flinch. He grabbed Michael by the collar, leaned in close, patted his face, and said in a low, dangerous voice, "Sarah is like my own daughter. I raised her myself, and for her, I'm willing to do anything. Don't think I'm bluffing. You can test me if you want. Refuse to sign those papers and I guarantee you won't live longer." Then 3 days. Michael's bravado crumbled under my uncle's steely gaze. His body started to tremble, not because he cared about me, but because of what he was about to lose, my kidney. Just then, Uncle Robert pulled out a check and tossed it to Michael. Michael's eyes widened as he saw the figure, greed momentarily overcoming his fear. He gritted his teeth, nodded, and that was it. We completed the divorce papers that same day, signing everything. Michael, with the check in hand, agreed to leave without a fight. As he packed up his things and prepared to leave our house, Uncle Robert couldn't resist one final comment. "Before you go, pretty boy, you might want to swing by the hospital. There's a little surprise waiting for you." Michael shot us a hateful glare before storming out with his suitcase. I then turned to Uncle Robert, frustrated. "Why'd you give him that check? He doesn't deserve a single penny." Uncle Robert just flicked my forehead, shaking his head with a sigh. "You don't get it, do you? It's all part of the plan, you silly girl. Don't worry about the money. It's not as easy to take as he thinks." I blinked confused and blurted out, "Wait, was the check fake?" He chuckled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Oh, the check's real. But whether he gets to spend it, well, that's a whole different story. Come on, we've got somewhere to be. The real fun is about to start." I had no idea what my uncle was up to, acting so mysteriously. Knowing my uncle's temper, I would have expected him to have already lashed out after finding out how Michael and Vanessa had schemed against me. But both at the hospital and the police station, he remained calm and collected. He even stopped me from telling the police that Michael and Vanessa had plotted against me, which left me confused. Later, on our way to the hospital, Uncle Robert made a call. "Stephen, everything's lined up on my end. That fat Richard Gray is going down today. You've got all the proof of his bribery and embezzlement, right? Good. We'll talk more when we meet tonight." After hanging up, Uncle Robert saw the puzzled look on my face and chuckled. "The deputy director's been throwing his weight around, pushing Stephen to the limit. Stephen's under evaluation, and he didn't want to make waves, so Richard's been getting cocky. Lucky for him, I'm here dealing with your mess, and we've teamed up to take Richard down. We've uncovered enough dirt to bury him, and it turns out that your darling ex-husband and Vanessa are tangled up in it too. You'll see when we get to the hospital. It's going to be one hell of a show." His cryptic words only piqued my curiosity more. What on earth was he planning? When we pulled up to the hospital, there was already a crowd gathered out front, all staring at the big screen outside. As we made our way closer, I caught a glimpse of what everyone was watching and my jaw nearly hit the floor. On the screen, in crystal clear footage, was none other than the chubby deputy director Richard Gray and Vanessa, locked in a very intimate embrace in what looked like his office. I could hardly believe my eyes. Wasn't Vanessa supposed to be head over heels for Michael? How had she ended up involved with the deputy director? This was beyond anything I'd imagined. On the big screen, Vanessa's face was flushed red as she coyly said, "You rascal, you're going to wear me out. Dragging me into your office like this in broad daylight. Aren't you afraid someone will find out?" Smug, the deputy director chuckled. "Relax, my office is soundproof. No one can hear us. Consider this your punishment for the mess you caused today. If it weren't for me, you'd be in real trouble." Rolling her eyes upward, Vanessa snorted. Who would have thought that bitch Sarah had an uncle? If her uncle hadn't barged into the operating room, I would have had her kidney by now. Now we've got to start from scratch and find a new match for my brother. The deputy director shrugged, unconcerned. "No rush. This hospital's full of potential donors. We'll find a match soon enough. All we need to do is trick the right family. Once we do, a kidney transplant's easy. Enough about that. What's your plan with Michael? After today, Sarah's sure to divorce him. Are you really planning to marry that idiot?" Annoyed, Vanessa rolled her eyes at Richard and sarcastically replied, "It's not like I have a choice. Besides, would you dare leave your old hag of a wife and marry me instead?" The deputy director let out an awkward laugh. "My wife may be old and ugly, but her family's still got some pull. I'm still banking on their influence to get me the hospital director position." Vanessa sneered. "Well, I'll marry Michael and still see you at the hospital. Besides, I'm already pregnant with your baby, and I told Michael it's his. I need to marry him soon, before my belly starts showing. I'm not about to become a single mom." As I watched their disgusting exchange on the big screen, my stomach churned. The crowd around the hospital was just as stunned. Faces were frozen in shock, and murmurs rippled through the onlookers. I turned to Uncle Robert, barely able to believe what I was seeing. "Uncle, did you do this?" He smirked, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Pretty exciting, isn't it? But it's just getting started. Keep watching." In front of the hospital, many people had already taken out their phones to record the scene. Security guards tried to disperse the crowd, but no one was going anywhere. Even hospital staff, doctors, nurses, everyone, having heard the commotion, rushed over, their jaws dropping when they saw what was playing on the big screen. Just then, the scene on the screen changed. The phone in the deputy director's office began ringing, interrupting his steamy moment with Vanessa. Annoyed, the deputy director yanked the cord from the wall. But, almost immediately, both his and Vanessa's cell phones started buzzing, which they ignored as well. Those calls were probably from someone in the hospital trying to warn them that their every move was being broadcast on the large screen outside. Suddenly, the office door was kicked open, and a furious Michael appeared at the entrance, glaring viciously at the frozen Vanessa and the deputy director. Vanessa's face turned ghostly white. She opened her mouth to say something, but Michael had already stormed into the office. He was holding a claw hammer, and in a fit of rage, he swung it wildly at the deputy director. "Help! Murderer!" The deputy director screamed, scrambling to get away, but Michael was faster. The hammer came crashing down, smashing into his leg with a sickening thud. Vanessa, paralyzed with fear, didn't even bother to cover herself as she shrieked and bolted from the office. The deputy director writhed in pain, gasping, "Michael, wait, don't do this. Killing me won't solve anything. I can pay you, name your price." However, Michael, eyes wild with rage, wasn't listening. With another swing, the hammer slammed into the deputy director's head. Blood spurted everywhere as he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Even if he survived, that blow was enough to leave him permanently damaged. But Michael wasn't done. Still clutching the hammer, his eyes bloodshot and crazed, he pursued Vanessa. Moments later, the entire hospital watched in stunned silence as Vanessa, naked and terrified, came sprinting out of the hospital with a bloodthirsty Michael chasing after her, screaming at the top of his lungs. Michael brought the hammer down hard on Vanessa's head, sending her crumpling to the ground in convulsions. But he didn't stop there. He kept swinging, again and again, his voice a crazed snarl. "You wretched bitch! You all deserve to die." Even after hospital security swarmed him, pinning him to the ground, Michael kept shouting and cursing at Vanessa as she lay in a pool of blood. He looked like a rabid animal. I stood there, staring blankly at Uncle Robert, waiting for him to explain. He took a slow drag from his cigarette, then laughed, completely unfazed. "Your ex came looking for Vanessa, so I had someone swipe his check and lead him straight to Richard's office. As for the hammer, my men placed it right by the office door. To be honest, I wasn't sure if your pretty boy ex could handle both of them. Of course, no matter how perfect the plan is, things can go wrong. So Stephen and I had backup plans in place, just in case. But judging by how things played out, our backup plans will just be a little icing on the cake now." Uncle Robert then flicked my forehead lightly, his tone full of disappointment. "Silly girl. Let this be a lesson for you. Next time, call me the minute things get out of hand." I watched as Michael, still struggling under the weight of the guards, screamed and writhed. My mind was a whirlwind of disbelief. Could my luck be that bad? I muttered. "One scumbag like him is enough to warn me for life. There's no way I'll run into another one like him." Hearing this, Uncle Robert scoffed and replied with the wisdom of someone who had been through it all. "Don't be so sure. Life's full of scumbags. You'll meet a few more, trust me. But don't worry, the more you go through, the tougher you get. Like me. I've dealt with my share of lowlifes back in the day. It's all experience. I'll tell you some stories later, so you'll know how to handle them." The deputy director didn't die from the hammer blow, but he might as well have. After all, Michael's attack left him with a brain hemorrhage, permanent blindness, and a severe concussion. Not long after, Stephen Cole, the hospital director, exposed all the shady dealings the deputy director had been involved in. Learning that all, his wife promptly filed for divorce, and with her family's backing gone, the deputy director was fired and arrested. A few days later, he took his own life by smashing his head against the wall in the detention center. As for Vanessa, she didn't die either, but the repeated blows to her head left her in a vegetative state. Her scandal with the deputy director went viral, completely ruining her. The very people who once defended her, patients, doctors, students, turned against her, calling her shameless and cruel. Even her family faced backlash online. In the end, they disowned her, leaving her alone in a hospital bed, forgotten. Michael, on the other hand, was still alive. After his arrest, he wasn't the same. He had moments of laughter, followed by bouts of uncontrollable crying, as though his mind had snapped. I visited him once, but he didn't even recognize me. Still, his family refused to give up on him. They even got a certificate proving he was mentally ill, allowing him to be released on bail and moved to a psychiatric hospital. But as I watched him leave the detention center, I saw it just a brief flash, a smirk of triumph on his face. He's faking it, I hissed through clenched teeth, pretending to be crazy to escape punishment. Uncle, are we just going to sit back and watch this happen? Uncle Robert yawned lazily, glancing in another direction. Relax, there are people who want him dead even more. Just going to sit back and watch this happen. Uncle Robert yawned lazily, glancing in another direction. Relax, there are people who want him dead even more. Then we do. Just as he said that, the sound of a roaring engine cut through the air. An old, beat-up truck barreled toward Michael. His family and the officers escorting him dove out of the way, but Michael wasn't so lucky. The truck hit him head-on, sending him flying. His face twisted in terror and despair as the wheels crushed him. I stood frozen, watching in disbelief as the police immediately pulled the driver from the truck. It was Vanessa's brother, the one with kidney failure. Karma indeed had come full circle. Uncle Robert stretched, completely unfazed, and told the driver to head home. Well, that's the end of the show. Let's go. Your aunt's made soup, and she's waiting for us at home. I blinked a few times, trying to process everything. Uncle, did you arrange for Vanessa's brother to run over Michael? Uncle Robert grinned, his eyes twinkling mischievously. Take a guess. I glanced back at Michael's mangled body, lying motionless under the truck's wheels. Ironic as it was, but it was. Like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I felt free. From now on, I hope I never encounter another scumbag like him. Thank you, heavens, for giving me another chance at life. Uncle, I want sweet and sour ribs. I requested, a grin breaking out on my face. All right, he chuckled, ruffling my hair. I'll have your aunt make them as soon as we get home.